Is it tender?
A little.
Okay, so the intercostals and the intercostalis, they're both pretty tender. Just, they're like little muscles that we never really touch. Oh, your back just popped.
It did.
I'm like, are you okay? Did I break you? No, you're all good. So I almost feel like doing the intercostals would be better first, just to like loosen them up. So I'm gonna come around to the other side here. Trying to follow his routine too much. So, and even like working on the lats, I'm trying to remember if we might get into lat work with the shoulder work, but because the lats are such a huge muscle that come down, it's kind of nice to like loosen all of this, and then the trapezius as well. And we did some of this kind of work in Swedish too, but now we're going slow and we're getting real specific. Is that pressure okay?
Mm-hmm.
So each finger is in between ribs. So depending on your client and their muscle, you might have a little bit harder time getting between the ribs, or you might need to you might have to use a lot more pressure, but never more than they can handle for sure. So we're working all the ribs all the way up to the scapula here. So now I like to do a little vibration. Is that tender?
Yes, that's a little.
Okay. Does it refer anywhere?
No, not that I can feel right now.
Okay. It's super common with your with this all of this work for their spine to pop and just shift. If there's ever popping and like sharp pain, then that is really bad. But if it just pops and there's no pain, then don't be alarmed. It's normal. But with what she has going on up in here with her her little spasm that's kind of protecting her, I think you need rib work, honestly. Because sometimes the rib gets too far away from the spine, kind of pulled forward, or gets shoved back too far, and then it gets really hypersensitive in here, and it just feels like it needs to guard itself. There's a lot going on. Keep popping over it. So I'm just gonna hold between these two here. And I'm not using a ton of pressure, so I can use like my stacked joints with my fingers like this. If you had somebody where you had to go way deeper, then I would make sure I worked on the other side and pushed instead of pulled. So I think I'm gonna just, if she can tolerate it.
Let's go.
I'm gonna use my thumb. How is that?
Good, you can go deeper.
Is that enough, or do you want more? Wow, it decided for you.
Yeah, it did.
Let's see if I can use my elbow in here. It's hard to use your elbow because it's such a small area, but luckily I have a little elbow. Jeez Louise. It just does what it wants.
I can feel it. It's referring out actually to the front of my sternum.
From here to your sternum?
Yeah.
Wow.
I can almost feel it on my stomach.
Can you? Okay. Yeah, I can definitely tell like there's a whole lot going on here. And because it's not like releasing as quickly as I would really want it to, my guess is that this side needs to release first. So if I'm like in here and I'm like not making progress, then usually maybe her shoulder needs to be released, or the opposite side needs to be released, or maybe it's the opposite shoulder. So this kind of work should be pretty quick. and you should be able to get stuff to relax. And if it doesn't, sorry. And if it doesn't, then try going somewhere else for a little while, either above it, below it, or across from it, and then come back to it to see if it makes a difference. So, but for the sake of this video, we're just gonna move on. We're just gonna ignore it, pretend like it's not there.
I do it every day.
All right, so now the big one, the QLs. So it's super common for people to tweak their back. Sometimes it's just like they go down and tie their shoes and they stand up too quick and their back is out and they are on the floor crying and it's the worst. And you're like, I'm so old, this sucks. So, so you have your 12th rib is a big attachment point and then the iliac crest here. So I typically start with like a nicer, I kind of taught you guys this in Swedish, just a nice like, hello QL, I'm not going to stab you, kind of stroke. And then I like to kind of come in a little bit more specific with my fingertips. I start with fingertips because I never usually have to go very deep. And then I'm just going to kind of ride, is that okay? Mm-hmm. I'm going to ride along the 12th rib here. A little less, okay. Yeah. Do you feel that refer anywhere?
Not yet.
Okay. So a lot of times, I know I've mentioned in the past, but a lot of times people's low back does not feel better after the massage. It actually takes a day. So if they feel, it's common for them to actually feel worse, mostly because of the way they have to lay. Were you having low back pain before we started this?
No.
Okay. So she should be fine. She shouldn't be worse or anything. But if they do have like really bad low back pain, I've kind of mentioned in the past, you can always have them put a pillow underneath their stomach and that lifts their stomach up so there's not as much of a curve in their low back, which really takes off the edge. So if you're having a client who cannot lay flat on their stomach because their low back hurts too much, just get a pillow in there as fast as you can and it's almost instant relief. So just remember that when you are working with low back stuff. And so now I'm down on the iliac crest part here and we're just going to ride along here. Is that tender?
So far so good.
Okay.
The pressure's good.
The pressure's good, okay. And I'm really not using very much pressure. I could definitely use at least 10 to 20 times more pressure than I'm using right now. But you usually don't have to. And you have to remember, like, kidneys are right underneath this. So there's really no point of going super deep. You can get the external obliques here. And you know how they were talking? Are you ticklish?
I'm ticklish right now.
I'll surprise her with it later. But you can do that pinching thing. Sorry. Now it's going to be impossible to not be ticklish.
I know, it's going to be fine. Just a heavy hand.
Just get in there.
Heavy hand.
Stop
yeah,
talking about it. Just do it already.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll do this another day. It's fine. We don't have to do it. It's not a big deal.
Try the other side. Also, I better.
Okay. So you're just pinching this and kind of rolling it out. So your internal obliques are in the front and they are like, envision you're putting your hands in your front pockets. And your external obliques are, imagine putting your hands in your back pockets. So they run like this. So they're important stabilizers. So by pinching them, you can kind of feel like if there are adhesions in it or any trigger point stuff. I know he doesn't really go into that externals. He goes into internals, but that's okay. Yeah, so she could tolerate it over there. So that's another thing to do, and it's not super invasive. But the QLs, so we kind of ran across the 12th rib. We ran across the iliac crest. Now I like to do like a seek and destroy sort of in between. So I like to kind of start at the iliac crest, use my fingertips, and slowly kind of rock and go up until I feel like little trigger points. If they are super duper duper tender, go ahead and grab their opposite hip and bring it up towards, so you're shortening it this way, and you can usually get in there at least a little bit. Some people, it depends on what they've got going on. The big thing you want to be also careful with is if they have fused discs in their back, you do not want to be loosening all this stuff up because it's fused together. So there's a reason why either your body naturally fuses itself to protect the spinal cord, or there's a lot of disc issues, so the doctors fuse it. And in that case, you don't want to do specific trigger point work and loosen it up. If someone's fused in here, just some nice, effleurage. You can do trigger point work further up, but if you cause too much movement in here, then you can actually cause way more pain and issues. So that's just something to keep in mind.